My elder sister and I are twin souls, as the legitimate eldest daughter. She was destined from birth to become the future Empress, while I, the legitimate second daughter, was betrothed to a son of the general's household. However, despite her ascension to the throne, my sister remained childless and was ultimately cast into the cold palace for her heinous crimes against the royal offspring, dragging our parents and brothers down with her. Though I married into the family of a concubine's son, he, despite his youth, distinguished himself through remarkable military achievements, elevating me to the highest status. Among the women of the general's estate, I and her final moments, my sister longed for one last meeting with me, expressing her desire for a family member by her side, as she could not bear to face our parents or brothers. Yet, upon my visit to the palace, she commanded several elderly eunuchs to humiliate me, before ultimately serving me a cup of poisoned wine, uttering the chilling words, as twins, "We shall share both life and death." When I awoke, we found ourselves reborn within our mother's womb, just as she was about to give birth. In a desperate attempt, my sister kicked me out. This time, I emerged as the legitimate eldest daughter. The moment I entered the world, I burst into laughter. My sister, blinded by envy of my apparent glory, remained oblivious to the trials I endured in the general's household over the years. All I desired was a tranquil life, a pursuit that had long eluded me. Chapter 1. In the womb, my sister exerted every effort to change positions, forcefully kicking me aside. I knew then that she too had been reborn. We were soon presented to our father, who at this time was still the spirited left chancellor of the realm. In our past life, my sister enjoyed unmatched favor upon entering the imperial court, basking in the height of glory. However, her failure to conceive led to a gradual decline in her status, and witnessing other consorts bearing royal offspring ignited her jealousy. Each time my sister caused a disturbance in the palace, our mother would compel our father to intervene on her behalf, as she always favored the elder sister. Despite my father's repeated efforts to protect her, the Empress' lack of virtue had long since displeased the emperor. When my sister once again committed atrocities against the royal heirs, the emperor could no longer tolerate her and banished her to the cold palace. Our father and brothers faced dire consequences, leading to the fall of our once prestigious household. Stripped of power, my father was further ostracized by his colleagues, losing his foothold in the court. I wrote to my father, urging him and my brothers to resign and seek refuge with me, yet our mother vehemently opposed this, berating me in her letter as an ungrateful wolf, accusing me of pursuing my own pleasures instead of aiding our family. Even when I was later humiliated by eunuchs in the palace and met my demise, our mother merely remarked that I deserved it, in our previous life. My father bestowed names upon my sister and me upon our birth. The names had long been decided. The legitimate eldest daughter was to be called Zhou Suichi, while the legitimate second daughter was named Zhou Sueha. However, when my father indicated that my sister would be called Zhou Sueha, she erupted into tears. I understood her intentions. She sought to claim the name Zhou Suichi for herself. After all, the name of the legitimate eldest daughter bore great expectations, carefully chosen after much deliberation, while the second daughter's name seemed rather casual. As my sister wept, I joined her in tears. With each call of our names by our father, we both cried anew. I had no desire for that name laden with expectations. I preferred the name from my past life, Zhou Sueha, reminiscent of wild grass, vibrant with life. It was only after the midwife cautiously prompted him that my father attempted to call us by our previous names. This time, both my sister and I smiled, especially I, who laughed the loudest. In this life, I am the legitimate eldest daughter, yet my mother still favors the second daughter, Zhou Suchi, even to an intolerable extent. As noted by the old nurse by her side, Zhou Suchi is merely the legitimate second daughter. After all, I am the one destined to enter the palace in the future. I feigned tears in the old nurse's arms, hoping to evoke some sympathy. Yet my mother still lifted Zhou Suchi into her embrace, turning to the nurse to lament. Alas, although they look alike, just look at the delightful spark in Suchi's eyes. It's unfortunate that her marriage is unsuitable to a lowly soldier, no less, and he's a bastard. Do you think I should ask the Prime Minister to petition the Emperor to swap Suchi's marriage with that of Sueha? My mother's favoritism knows no bounds. My own eyes brimmed with a yearning for her affection, yet she remained oblivious to my plight. In my previous life, my mother favored Josuchi. I had thought it was solely because she was the eldest daughter. Yet in this life, as the legitimate eldest daughter, I find myself in the same predicament. This situation escalates as we grow older. Josuchi in this life is even more adept at winning hearts. The entire household revolves around her, and she has garnered considerable renown in the capital. My mother's adoration for her intensifies as she relegates my upbringing to the nurse dispatched from the palace, only to scold me when I err. Josuchi frequently appears before me, often regarding me with a patronizing gaze, repeating, "Josueha, you are truly pitiable." Initially, I would deliberately weep for her attention, but as her words grew more repetitive, I became indifferent. My mother has suggested several times to swap our marriage arrangements, but Josuchi has firmly refused each time. Only then does she treat me with a semblance of kindness. This engagement was arranged long ago. How could I steal my elder sister's marriage? She places particular emphasis on the term elder sister. I understand her hopes for the tragic downfall of the legitimate eldest daughter of the Seong family in the palace, while simultaneously anticipating her own day of entering the general's household. However, unlike my previous life, this year, when we turn 15, the general's illegitimate son, Ching-pei, unexpectedly visits. Ching-pei, a young general who seldom returns home from the military, let alone to the Seong residence. In my past life, under my father's instruction, I had once attempted to send him letters, but received no response, leading me to abandon any hope. To my astonishment, in this life, he has come to visit of his own accord. It appears Josuchi indeed possesses an irresistible charm. I find myself in awe of her. Josuchi shyly covers her face with a handkerchief. Why such a sudden visit? Your letter revealed nothing. I stand behind her, gazing at the once familiar visage, and suddenly burst into laughter. Both of them turn their puzzled gazes towards me. Realizing my indiscretion, I excuse myself to grant them privacy. Miss Zhou, please hold on. It is only when Ching-pei blocks my path that I realize he is addressing me as Miss Zhou. In my previous life, even after our marriage, he refused to call me his wife, opting instead for Miss Zhou. In this life, I wish to avoid entanglements with him and frown as I attempt to leave. Yet Ching-pei remains unyielding, leading to an awkward standoff. May I ask why General Ching insists on keeping my sister here? Josuchi's gaze flickers between Ching-pei and me, seemingly trying to discern something. I, too, am puzzled by Ching-pei's insistence. In my previous life, I was aware of his unrequited love for my elder sister. He had, in drunken moments, frequently compared me unfavorably to her, belittling me and subjecting me to humiliation. Yet at that time, my elder sister was already wed to the palace. Regardless, I have no desire to entangle myself with him again. I attempt to sidestep Ching-pei, but my sleeve is caught. Josueha, are you so eager to evade me? This visit is at the behest of the Prime Minister to discuss marriage matters, which concerns you as well, hence my request for you to stay. Josuchi's expression shifts as she observes the powerful hand gripping my sleeve. My heart grows heavy. In this life, I have no connection with Ching-pei, yet something feels amiss. Does he know something? I search his eyes for clues, but they have grown cold and devoid of the prior flicker of emotion. Together, we proceed to my father's study, where to my surprise, my mother is also present. My father greets Ching-pei with great warmth, while my mother wears a cold expression, tenderly holding Josuchi. I am aware that my mother has long harbored dissatisfaction with this marriage arrangement for Josuchi. Nephew, this matter should have been discussed with General Chung. Yet he insists that your marriage is entirely your own decision. Perhaps that is for the best. Your father is rather stubborn, and I am not certain I could sway him. It turns out Josuchi is anxious about prolonged delays, wishing to hasten the wedding date. My father had corresponded with General Chung regarding this, yet it seems the general has left the matter to Ching-pei, leading my father to merely extend an invitation. And, unexpectedly, Ching-pei has come. His feelings for Josuchi are evidently profound. I remain silent on the side. However, advancing the wedding date is not as straightforward as it seems. Josuchi has indeed been spoiled, and both my parents indulge her whims. As the legitimate eldest daughter, I am yet unmarried. How can she proceed with her marriage? Moreover, I am destined for a royal union. Yet I still underestimated my father. He has colluded with the Astronomical Bureau, actually moving up the date of my marriage to the palace. This information had never been shared with me until now. Nevertheless, it may not be so bad. I shall enjoy the comforts of the palace sooner. Compared to my previous life, where each day was fraught with trepidation, becoming the Empress seems remarkably uncomplicated. As long as I fulfill my duties, I can live without the burden of other scrutiny, a life I yearn for immensely. My father symbolically inquires about my opinion, to which I readily agree. Cheng Pei shoots me a cold glance. I remain unfazed. Even if he knows something, what does it matter? I am destined for the palace as Empress, and when the day comes, his entire family will bow before me. Cheng Pei finally diverts his gaze from me. He kneels, presenting a stack of letters to my father. Uncle, I must beg your pardon for a matter. His declaration sends shockwaves through the room. Zhou Suqi's eyes brim with tears as she collapses into her mother's embrace, weeping. My father, incensed, hurls the letters at Cheng Pei. Preposterous. Nonsense. Do you take my family for fools? Do you think I, the esteemed Prime Minister, would allow such disrespect? Cheng Pei remains silent on the floor. I, too, am taken aback. This situation is undeniably absurd. It turns out the letters exchanged with Zhou Suqi were not from Cheng Pei at all, but rather from another illegitimate son of the Cheng family, a peer of Cheng Pei, who is also a young general. The letters, through a twist of fate, ended up in Cheng Pei's possession. The two expressed their affections for one another in the letters with great intimacy, and youthful passion often leads to impulsive declarations. Ironically, Cheng Pei had marked those declarations with annotations. Uncle, the best resolution to this matter is to allow them to unite. Cheng Zhe is no less suitable than I, and the Xiong family would not suffer any loss. Most crucially, the one Miss Zhou favors is my brother, and the one I favor is someone else. Cheng Pei's gaze once again settles upon me. I meet his familiar eyes, a chill running down my spine. No, Cheng Pei's target this time is me. He is the one corresponding with Zhou Suqi, and I recognize his handwriting. Cheng Pei is adept in two styles of writing. He typically employs one style, while the other, used for important military correspondence, is seldom seen by anyone. The correspondence exchanged regarding Zhou Suqi's first birthday was inscribed in this very script. How profound are Cheng Pei's sentiments. He possesses an understanding of my mother. My mother, not at all pleased with Zhou Suqi's marriage, would certainly wish for a change if another suitor were to take Zhou Suqi's place. Despite Cheng Pei being the most distinguished among the sons of the general's household, his status as a bastard son remains unalterable. Should Zhou Suqi's marriage be reassigned, my mother would undoubtedly compel me to forsake Zhou Suqi as well. She originally aspired to have Zhou Suqi enter the palace as the Empress, yet Zhou Suqi has always adamantly refused. This time, she seems determined to exhaust every effort to place Zhou Suqi in the palace. And I, once again, would find myself marrying into the general's household. When the time comes, it would not be difficult for Cheng Pei to revert the marriage arrangement. Yet, such reasoning eludes me. Hasn't Cheng Pei always held Zhou Suqi in high regard? In a previous lifetime, Zhou Suqi met her demise in the cold palace. Not long after, Cheng Pei, having ascended to the role of General Cheng, forcefully entered the palace. He took that position, yet failed to establish a successor. The state title may have changed, but the Empress remained the same, the deceased Zhou Suqi. Therefore, what is Cheng Pei truly orchestrating with this recent upheaval? Ultimately, no resolution was reached. Zhou Suqi insisted on marrying Cheng Pei, claiming that the affectionate words in the letters were meant for him, oblivious to the fact that there was another in her heart. Yet Cheng Pei remained resolute in returning the marriage to his illegitimate brother. He stated it was not a matter of giving away, but rather returning. He also asserted that he would only marry for love. Zhou Suqi wept profusely, for she understood our mother better than I. If she does not marry Cheng Pei, she would have no choice but to heed our mother's wishes and enter the palace as Empress. The dread from our past lives rendered her trembling. I too shared in this trepidation. Having seemingly escaped our destined fates, we were once again drawn back to our origins by Cheng Pei's mere meddling. As soon as Cheng Pei departed, my mother indeed proposed that Zhou Suqi enter the palace, while I should marry another illegitimate son of the Cheng family. She insisted that, as the legitimate eldest daughter of the Xiong family, I ought to alleviate the family's burdens. However, my father disagreed. For years, I had been personally tutored by the palace's matron, while Zhou Suqi had been spoiled. Once we entered the palace, the truth of our swapped identities would be easily exposed. Zhou Suqi threatened to take her own life, insisting she would not enter the palace. Yet she feigned concern, saying that if she were to seize her elder sister's marriage, how could she ever be worthy of respect? However, our mother was equally disinclined to see Zhou Suqi wed to another illegitimate son of the general's household. My heart plummeted. Before leaving, Cheng Pei quietly uttered a few words to me. He too had been reborn. However, it was a recent rebirth, and he recognized me. Aware that this time I had assumed the identity of the legitimate eldest daughter alongside Zhou Suqi. His voice was low and imbued with a rare tenderness. Shuei, I was wrong. Fortunately, heaven has granted me a chance for redemption, and I will do everything in my power to make amends to you. Therefore, do not attempt to flee any longer. In this lifetime, you are destined to marry me. So he was privy to everything. Yet he allowed events to unfold as they did, failing to take any action on my behalf. Only upon my demise did he express regret. There is no more despicable sentiment in this world. Cheng Pei lamented that he had reincarnated too late. Thus, he could only devise such a base strategy to compel Zhou Suqi into the palace as Empress. Nevertheless, he assured me that he would find a way for me to wed him. To him, winning a woman seemed far easier than securing victory in battle. Yet he believed that by relinquishing his identity and uttering an apology, I ought to acquiesce. He never once inquired whether I was willing. But how could I ever fulfill his desires? A mid-autumn flower-viewing banquet was to be held in the palace, with the Empress Dowager inviting eligible young men and women from prominent families across the capital. The third princess specifically dispatched a message, insisting that I must attend, claiming she wished to foster a bond with me, her future sister-in-law. However, I was aware that this was all orchestrated by Zhou Suqi, as she had always maintained a close rapport with the third princess, and this lifetime was no different. I naturally planned to attend, for I had a performance of my own prepared. During the banquet, the third princess instructed a maid to convey that she had prepared some light wine for me. Accompanied by the maid, I arrived at a secluded garden. The third princess personally poured a cup of wine for me, her smile radiant as she extended it toward me. Sister-in-law, we shall soon be family. Let us grow closer. I held the wine cup unmoving. Why does sister-in-law not drink? Is it that you hold this princess in disdain? I raised my hand and spilled the wine upon the ground. This wine is tainted with poison. I shall decline, dear sister-in-law. I surveyed my surroundings, my gaze settling on a nearby lotus pond, gesturing toward it. Will your royal brother not be arriving by that pond shortly? I shall go wait there. You should summon the others. The third princess, being youthful and naive, wore her emotions openly. Her expression shifted from shock to indignation. Zhou Suihe, you are indeed as cunning as Suqi described. You, I grasped her delicate fingers. No need for such exclamations. We cannot afford to delay the plan. I stood to head toward the lotus pond, intending to leap in without requiring the third princess's minions to push me. However, she caught hold of my garment. Well, perhaps you should not go after all, and I shan't call anyone. I feel as though you are not as intolerable as she claimed. This third princess was simply innocent and straightforward, easily manipulated, but not entirely foolish. I patted her hand and winked at her. Quickly now. I am eager to become your sister-in-law. Just days prior, Zhou Suqi's maid had come to report to me, and I had resolved to turn the tables, expediting my arrangement with the emperor. My mother threatened my father with death, insisting that our marriages be swapped. Zhou Suqi, fearing the recurrence of past events, was eager to utilize the third princess to solidify my entry into the palace. She had also taken precautions, ensuring that while securing my position, she could avoid my disgrace in the emperor's presence, allowing me to enter the palace, but not ascend to the primary position. Without the primary position, I could not cultivate adversaries, thus avoiding the tragic fate she endured in her previous life. Naturally, she would oppose it. In my past life, I had never understood the source of her animosity towards me. I had always regarded her as my dearest sister, and she had been nothing but kind to me. In this lifetime, I have come to comprehend. She had genuinely cared for me. In our previous life, I had always been overshadowed by her brilliance. Yet I took pride in having such an exceptional sister. She showered me, her younger sister, with affection.
But when did it change?
Was it when she began to falter in the palace while I gained standing in the general's household? She could accept my good fortune, but not the thought of me surpassing her. Little did she know that my outward success in the general's household was merely superficial. I had voiced my grievances to my parents, yet they insisted I endure for the sake of the family's honor. For the family, I swallowed all humiliation and pain. I did not perish in the general's household, but instead fell victim to the very sister I had always cherished. Since she yearns to exchange places with me in this life, I shall grant her wish. Moments after the third princess departed, hurried footsteps approached from behind me. I discarded a mud-stained shoe and leapt into the lotus pond. Yet I miscalculated. The figure approaching was not the emperor, but Changpei. He rushed over, poised to leap in and rescue me. "Do not jump. I do not require your rescue." Changpei halted, suddenly comprehending my intent. "Zhou Sui he. Are you truly so enamored with vanity? I could bestow upon you a noble status. I promised I would compensate you to the best of my ability. Yet, you insist on coveting that lofty position? Do you have any idea how worried and anxious I was when the servants informed me she intended to conspire with the third princess against you? I hurried over to save you, only for you to refuse my assistance?" At that moment, genuine urgency surged within me. If the emperor were to arrive shortly, it would truly become a matter of great confusion. I had neither the time to attend to Changpei nor the desire to see him leap into the water to rescue me. Thus, I resorted to inciting his anger. "Jump in, and you shall be but a dog.
You,
truly unaware of your own good fortune." Changpei, the young general, was exceedingly proud and, as anticipated, did not plunge into the depths. Without a second thought, I swam towards the opposite side. Fortunately, after marrying into the general's household in my previous life, I had mastered the art of swimming. I heard the distant sound of retreating footsteps. Changpei had stormed off in a huff. What a false alarm! After much effort, I finally reached the shore, drenched from head to toe. If I were to be discovered at that moment, it would spell disaster. I glanced toward the bank. Yet the emperor's figure remained absent. Where had the third princess taken him? I could not afford to delay any longer. I must return before the banquet concluded. Aware that the day might bring unforeseen circumstances, I had prepared an identical gown, which I had concealed in the side hall. Yet, in order to change, I would have to swim back. The mere thought of encountering someone along the way filled me with dread. I could not take that risk. Where is Genie Joe? Is it truly that today's lotus pond will go unjumped? I grumbled while wringing out the water from my clothes. Just then, a soft chuckle echoed from above. Startled, I fell to the ground. Who could be here? I had just uttered the emperor's name. Such an indiscretion could cost me my head. Regret washed over me for my earlier lack of discretion as I contemplated looking up to see who it was. A cloth bundle suddenly fell from the tree, landing directly in front of me. The bundle was familiar. It was the one I had hidden in the side hall. "There is a rockery behind you. Quickly change into dry clothes inside. I shall keep watch here." Realizing that the figure in the tree was none other than the current emperor, I dared not lift my gaze. Suppressing my astonishment, I swiftly picked up the bundle and hurried towards the rockery. Why was Genie Joe here? How long had he been present? Had he witnessed the events that had just transpired? Why was he assisting me? Did his aid imply that I would not be punished for my perceived disrespect? Having changed into the garments, I emerged yet dared not voice my questions, merely trailing behind Genie Joe as we made our way back. Just as we reached the front of the side hall, the third princess and Zhou Shuqi rushed over, followed closely by Changpei. He was accompanied by a palace maid who was breathlessly carrying a gown that closely resembled mine. Our eyes met, and Changpei's gaze was ablaze with fury. Yet, upon seeing the emperor, he had no choice but to kneel. The third princess looked at me with concern, while Zhou Shuqi flashed a smile. I heard that sister fell into the water, so I hurried to come. It seems the emperor saved her. Suddenly, she seemed to have an epiphany, raising her voice. Oh dear, sister has also changed into clean clothes. The moment those words left her lips, all eyes turned to me. Cheng Pei clenched his fists, his teeth nearly grinding to dust. Yet, he once again knelt before Genie Zhou. I am guilty. My heart leaped to my throat. Was Cheng Pei about to publicly disclose that he had seen me jump into the water? Was he attempting to use my innocence to coerce the emperor into marrying us? Jin Izhou allowed Cheng Pei to kneel for some time before finally speaking. You are indeed guilty. I had not anticipated such a dramatic turn of events. Not only I, but all present were taken aback. With Jin Izhou's declaration of Cheng Pei's guilt, he was silenced, bound hand and foot, and thrown into the imperial prison. Furthermore, the emperor decreed that no one was allowed to visit him. Cheng Pei's expression of shock as he was captured was utterly amusing, and I could not help but laugh aloud. Jin Izhou shot a glare in my direction, and I quickly lowered my head, feigning ignorance. Initially, I had intended to wait until Zhou Shuqi married into the general's household before sending Cheng Pei to prison. However, I had not anticipated that this day would arrive so prematurely. Yet at this moment, the emperor was in the midst of favoring Cheng Pei. What had caused such a sudden shift? Jin Izhou accused Cheng Pei of plotting against the future empress. This weighty charge silenced even the ministers who had initially intended to plead for Cheng Pei. The emperor claimed he had witnessed the young general push me into the water before fleeing. Who would dare contest the emperor's testimony? Originally, Zhou Shuqi had arranged for someone to push me into the water, but I had voluntarily leaped into the lotus pond. Now, that witness had vanished. In this manner, the emperor could declare anyone as the perpetrator. At this juncture, my father felt compelled to speak on Cheng Pei's behalf, only to be met with immediate rebuttal from Jin Izhou. If he did not push her, why did he then conscience-strickenly send a palace maid to fetch a similar gown? He seeks to bury the evidence. My father was left speechless. Moreover, the marriage between our families had not been solidified, and with Cheng Pei imprisoned, my father, that old fox, would not exert himself unduly. With Cheng Pei silenced in the imperial prison, he was utterly incapable of defending himself. He could never have imagined that his declaration of guilt was intended to force the emperor to betroth me to him, yet it had inadvertently sealed his own fate. Zhou Shuqi was the first to react, rushing over to demand the truth of that day from me. She was certain that it was not Cheng Pei who had pushed me into the water. However, with the emperor's claim that he was the one who did it, I could only adamantly insist that it was indeed him. Zhou Shuqi nearly overturned my courtyard in her fury. Zhou Sueha, it is all your doing that has harmed Cheng Pei. You must plead with the emperor to release him. Even my mother urged me to enter the palace to intercede, claiming that if I could persuade the emperor to free Cheng Pei, he would remember my kindness and unite with Zhou Shuqi. Thus, all would be well. The Cheng family was currently in a position of power, and with the border wars unsettled, the emperor could not possibly act against Cheng Pei at this time. My father believed my appeal would be most fitting. He wished neither to offend the emperor nor the general's household. But for me, it was different. If successful, it would forge an alliance with the general's influence. If unsuccessful, I would offend neither side. I nodded in agreement. I can go, but do not regret it later. When I sought an audience with the emperor, Jin Izhou was not taken aback. Before I could utter a word, he spoke first. If you become my empress, I shall grant your request. I was taken aback. I had yet to say anything. Your Majesty, I am already destined to be your future empress. Have you mistaken me for someone else? Being a twin with Zhou Shuqi, it was entirely plausible for those unfamiliar with us to make such an error. Sue, I will not make another mistake this time. I merely fear that my empress will flee before entering the palace. I was taken aback. How did he know my intentions? But Jin Izhou did not elaborate further. As long as you agree to my request, I shall grant your request for coming here. Within a brief moment, I processed his words and quickly grasped the implications drawn from both my lives. I laughed, a genuine smile blossoming from within. It turned out that not everyone in this world regarded my life as inconsequential. Jin Izhou and I reached an agreement, with the stipulation that our wedding would take place after Zhou Shuqi's. Cheng Pei was released the very same day. However, having endured this ordeal, Cheng Pei became far more cautious. Among the most delighted by his release was Zhou Shuqi. She seemed to have forgotten how desperately she had pleaded with me earlier and did not utter a single word of gratitude afterward. This life, my good sister. I am off to enjoy the comforts of the general's household. Though you are about to ascend as Empress, that ruthless deep palace. TSK. You had better look after yourself. This time, I did not indulge her. I swiftly delivered 2 slaps across her face. Is this how you speak to your elder sister? As Zhou Shuqi attempted to retaliate, my guards swiftly restrained her. In this residence, I grew increasingly formidable. Until my wedding. Zhou Shuqi did not dare to appear before me again. On the day of her marriage, a grand procession of dowries accompanied her. With such an opulent display, it was only natural that both the venerable matriarch of the Chung family and her mother would be exceedingly pleased, albeit anxious. The day of the first birthday celebration after marriage was splendid indeed. However, before long, news of her faded from the household. 2 months later, Zhou Shuqi returned to her parental home, despondent and disheartened. Upon her entrance, her mother wept with compassion, lamenting her father's insistence on marrying her off to that illegitimate son. With a fierce glare directed at me, it was as if I had usurped Zhou Shuqi's promising match, when in truth, she had willingly relinquished it. Zhou Shuqi knelt at her father's feet, pleading for him to take her side in her desire for a divorce. The father, who had initially felt pity for her, immediately changed his demeanor. Preposterous. A married daughter is like spilled water. Moreover, our families have supported each other in the court. How can you allow a trivial grievance in the inner quarters to sever our ties? Father, it is not merely a trivial grievance. The inner quarters are not as they appear. I have endured immense hardship these past 2 months. If you do not permit my divorce, I shall be left with no choice but to end my life. I could not suppress a laugh. What? Is your beloved husband not protecting you? Zhou Shuqi's cries intensified. Originally, Zheng Pei had been her protector, but soon after, the matriarch ordered the old general to transfer Cheng Pei to military service. Despite his capabilities, he had to obey military orders. Amidst his overwhelming duties, he also faced Zhou Shuqi's daily letters filled with complaints and dissatisfaction. Gradually, he became worn down, losing the initial charm of their relationship. His responses came infrequently, consisting of mere platitudes urging her to maintain harmony with her mother-in-law and grandmother. Yet, in the general's household, mere submission did not guarantee kindness. Zhou Shuqi, unable to endure any longer, fled back to her family, believing that her once loving parents would be her strongest support. However, when she turned to her mother, she found her equally distressed. Concerned about the family's reputation, her mother advised her against being too headstrong, suggesting she endure the situation.
Shuqi.
You must not think only of yourself. You have an elder brother who, once he completes his studies and returns, must make his mark in the court and ultimately take over the family responsibilities. You need to consider him. Zhou Shuqi could scarcely believe her parents' words. In the face of family honor, they disregarded their beloved daughter. Ultimately, I was the one who intervened. My dear younger sister, I am soon to be wed into the palace and will be enjoying a life of luxury. During this time, you must not act recklessly. With my wedding approaching, and my father aware of the emperor's particular favor towards me, the family could not afford any missteps. Father, just now, Shuqi seemed to threaten to die before you. What shall we do? My father kicked her away. If you wish to die, then go back to the general's residence and die there. Someone, escort her out. I stifled a laugh, knowing only Zhou Shuqi, still kneeling on the ground, could see it. Zhou Sueha, do not rejoice too soon. Your days of hardship are soon to arrive. I turned to my father, feigning tears. Father, does she imply that my marriage to the palace will lead to a life of misery? As the honorable minister, he could not allow her to speak freely within his residence, and promptly ordered that Zhou Shuqi be returned to the general's estate. You are now a member of the general's household. Do not return to this residence. Zhou Shuqi clung desperately to the doorframe, yet was forcibly dragged onto the carriage by several servants. Her plea for help from her family would surely reach the general's household, and upon her return, she would truly face a life of hardship. Meanwhile, I sought entry into the palace once more. Cheng Pei, amidst military training, was unprepared when he was taken away. He found himself imprisoned in the infamous dungeon, the reasons for which remained unclear. In the court, many voices rose in defense of the general's household, assuming this was merely a minor tactic by the emperor prompted by the recent prominence of the general's family. Yet, as days passed, Pei remained gagged and bound, thrown into the foul-smelling dungeon. Just as he was on the brink of starvation, a bowl of ginseng soup was forced upon him to prolong his life. However, the rationale for his imprisonment remained a mystery to all. The general's household finally grew anxious. Both the elder general and General Chung personally came to the capital. However, Jin Ijo's actions shocked the entire court. He imprisoned all those who had come from the general's household. Tension enveloped the court as the voices that once supported the general's family began to wane. It was evident to all that the general's household had committed a grave mistake. With their backs against the wall, they resorted to leveraging the urgent military situation at the borders to compel the emperor to release Pei. Yet, Jin Ijo not only refused to release him but also personally promoted several individuals within the military, resolving the border crisis. The general's household was in a state of true desperation. The elder matriarch and Cheng's wife came to plead with my father. The prime minister's household was now tied to the general's household like a grasshopper on a string. Upon encountering these two women once again in this life, the hatred I had harbored could no longer be contained. In my previous life, they presented themselves as a kind old matriarch and a sensible mother-in-law. Yet, it was these two women who, while outwardly bestowing upon me endless glory, nearly drowned me in the silent strife of the inner quarters. Initially, they were cautious of Pei, but once they realized he would not protect me, they began to abuse me even more surreptitiously. I had thought their concerns stemmed from worries about Pei taking over the general's household, fearing I would gain power in the inner quarters. Only later did I discover that their mistreatment of me had been instigated by Pei himself. I will forever remember the hatred in his eyes when I confronted him. Zhou Sueha, if not for you, how could Suchi have been separated from me? Yet, I had never known of such a situation. I was not the unreasonable woman of the inner quarters. If he had desired another, he could have simply called off the engagement. I would rather remain unmarried for life than hinder another's happiness. But they insisted on their clandestine dealings. No, it was they who could only operate in secrecy. Thus, how could I have known? Pei, however, tightened his grip around my neck, the pressure increasing. But how could the cancellation of the engagement be my doing? Why is it that, day and night, you are by her side, yet fail to see it? I was thrown to the ground, gasping for breath, when suddenly everything became clear. Though he had achieved success at a young age, he remained a son of a concubine, lacking a solid foundation within the household. He could only marry me, the second daughter of the prime minister's household, for he was unworthy of the eldest daughter. Yet, Pei had never cared for me. Lacking alternatives, he placed all the blame upon me. Even as I entered the household and sacrificed so much for him, it paled in comparison to the weight of a girl he had loved in his youth. Thus, he let me languish in the household while still offering me some measure of care. All of this came to fruition because of his own actions, yet he sought to place the blame upon me. Even after my death, my body was returned by the servants of the general's household and unceremoniously discarded in a mass grave. Pei declared that I was unworthy to be interred in his family's ancestral tomb. Unworthy? Did Zhou Suchi deserve it? After my demise, the elder matriarch and Cheng's wife were filled with joy, for my substantial dowry would now fall into their hands. In this life, our fates intertwined once more. And so it was that grievances would be repaid, and enmity would be avenged. The elder matriarch, adorned with a title, personally penned a memorial after conferring with my father, which was submitted alongside his own petitions. They sought to unite the powers of the general's household and the prime minister's household to rescue Pei. If he were to fall, then the general's household would follow suit. The people of the general's household were astute. They understood that internal conflicts could be resolved. Yet when it came to external matters, they would protect one another. However, with Pei imprisoned, I made some efforts to ensure he remained there a little longer. I seized an opportune moment to discreetly conceal the evidence within my father's memorials, exerting considerable effort to ensure its flawless appearance in Jin Ijo's study. In my previous life, shortly after the demise of Zhou Shuqi, Pei instigated a rebellion. Prior to this, he had already colluded with the enemy and betrayed the nation, merely biding his time for a fitting opportunity. with Zhou Shuqi strategically placing spies within the palace and the support of hostile nations. Orchestrating a rebellion to seize power was not a daunting task. They all believed that Zhou Shuqi's tumultuous activities in the harem led to her relegation to the cold palace. In truth, the emperor had long sensed something amiss and had staged several performances specifically to provide a pretext for her confinement. The emperor could not afford to confront the Qing family at that juncture, and Zhou Shuqi still held value. Thus banishment to the cold palace was the optimal choice. The emperor cunningly used the spies Zhou Shuqi embedded to lure Qing Pei into rebellion. Zhou Shuqi learned the truth, but found herself powerless to act. Recognizing her only path was one of demise, she ultimately drew me into her fate. She transformed all her resentment and bitterness into a cup of poison, masquerading as familial affection, which cost me my life. Qing Pei, bereaved of his beloved, transferred his hatred to my lifeless form, ensuring my utter obliteration. Subsequently, when he raised his army and successfully breached the palace, he discovered it was a trap set by the emperor. His dying wish was to be buried alongside Zhou Shuqi. The emperor ultimately fulfilled this, binding their remains together and discarding them in a mass grave. However, Jin Izhou took it upon himself to perform a benevolent act. Unable to locate my remains, he erected a grave in my honor and placed my spirit tablet within the royal temple, where the high monks recited scriptures for me day and night. Thus, it was through their pious efforts that I was granted the chance of rebirth. Upon my return, my foremost endeavor was to secretly gather evidence of Qing Pei's treachery, awaiting the precise moment to act. And now, that moment has arrived. My father, in the grand hall, was rallying a few colleagues to intercede on his behalf. Yet, the esteemed Jin Izhou denied him this opportunity, preemptively commending him before he could speak. After expressing his gratitude, my father realized the implications of his so-called good deed. This merit was a double-edged sword, one he could neither fully claim nor entirely dismiss. In doing so, he had irrevocably offended the general's residence. After a moment's contemplation, this cunning old fox discerned his course of action. Engaging in treachery with the general's house was a grave matter that could cost him his head. How could he dare involve the Qing family? And as for the matriarchs of the Qing family, he dared not entangle himself with them again. His first action upon returning home was to ensure their capture and transport them to the dungeons. I timely intervened before my father. Father, the heart of a woman can be most venomous. If we deliver them thus, what if they turn against us once more? My father hesitated briefly, soon grasping my intent. The Qing residence also possessed a means of confinement, so he borrowed a complete set of torture instruments from the Jingzhou Inn and proceeded to extract the evidence of treachery from the general's residence within our own home. In truth, the instruments had barely been employed before the matriarch and the madam confessed. Yet again, I appeared just in time in the family dungeon. Father, these two are indeed of the general's lineage, capable of enduring torture beyond the norm. I am genuinely concerned that should they be imprisoned, they might recant their testimonies. After all, their resilience is formidable. Upon hearing this, my father directed the remainder of the torture upon them. The two women, kneeling and pleading for mercy, had lost the arrogance they once wielded over me in my past life. The evidence of treachery was irrefutable. All male members of the Qing family were imprisoned, awaiting execution, while the women were exiled. Zhou Shuqi, having entered the general's residence, could not escape her fate either. However, her punishment was even harsher, as she was condemned to die alongside Qing Pei. In her final moments, she cried out against the heavens for injustice. Yet, how could someone like her comprehend that misfortune and fortune are summoned solely by oneself? Qing Pei suffered the most, witnessing the beheading of all the male members of the general's house before meeting his own end. Their bodies were once again discarded in a mass grave. Jin Izhou truly harbored a long memory. My father, having reported the treachery, completely severed ties with the general's residence. Yet, I understood that Jin Izhou's actions were motivated by a desire to protect my maternal family from disgrace. Our wedding date was swiftly approaching. On the day of my marriage, I truly experienced a splendid affair. My father lavished all the valuable possessions of our household upon my dowry. I knew this must have been at Jin Izhou's behest. Upon entering the bridal chamber and lifting the veil, Jin Ijo gently embraced me. He remarked that in our previous life, he had exerted great effort so that we might have this chance at rebirth. In that past existence, he had encountered me early on, yet in parting, he regrettably forgot to inquire about my name. Initially, he felt a pang of remorse, but it soon dissipated upon encountering Zhou Shuqi, who had come running after him. He realized that the legitimate eldest daughter and the legitimate second daughter of the Chung family were twins. And he pondered that if I were not the legitimate eldest daughter betrothed to him, he would petition the emperor to alter the betrothal. Thus, he asked Zhou Shuqi for her name. The moment I was born, I burst into laughter. The name Jean was a twist of fate. In our last life, we were destined to miss each other. In that existence, Zhou Shuqi garnered all the affection, yet she still sought to compete with me. Naturally, she did not let go of Cheng Pei, to whom I was betrothed. Once Cheng Pei fell for her, he was bound by the constraints of the betrothal and could only acquiesce. Yet, he was unwilling to relinquish Zhou Shuqi, while she, having become the empress, could not bear to let other women usurp the emperor's favor. Her heart then gravitated towards Cheng Pei, leading to the subsequent events. Jin Ijo's eyes glistened with compassion. Sui He, this time I have finally protected you.